Welcome back to Thinking Green. We are on the air again after summer hiatus. And of course, Election Day for municipal races is this year, November 5th. Polls will be open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. And, you know, municipal elections are really important. They affect our lives day to day, much more than the presidential or the higher profile elections. So for one thing, be sure to vote. For another thing, just be prepared that all of our Thinking Green October shows will be focused on candidates for the election, so viewers can get a better idea of whom to vote for when Election Day comes. So with that in mind, my guest tonight is Frida Berrigan. She is the Green Party candidate for mayor. We'll talk about some little glitches along the way later. But she is the Green Party approved candidate for mayor, and we're going to talk to her about like how the campaign is going and why she's running. Sure. So, welcome, Frida.
Thank you, Rana. Happy to be here.
Well, you know, I'm kind of glad after summer vacation to be back, you know, on the set. It's kind of fun. So, I guess I wanted to start out and ask you, like, you know, why you agreed to run and what your own goals for this are.
Well, as you know, I've been a member of the Green Party probably most of the time that I've lived in New London. I moved here in 2010. And what I always admired about the Greens is how they helped make local politics accessible and provided my point of entry into our local municipal arena. And I campaigned for Myrna for Board of Ed, and really enjoyed the process. I didn't do a ton of it. I had small kids at the time, but enjoyed going door to door, enjoyed talking to people, and really got to see how, you know, Myrna being on the Board of Ed helped me identify more directly with how our schools are governed and how how our schools work. You serving on planning and zoning, helped me learn about that. And so I have always appreciated that about the Green Party. And I think in a community as small and interconnected as New London is, that the Greens, even though we're not, you know, a huge number of people are able to have a real impact. And so as this election kind of trotted into the foreground, I was invited to see myself in that picture as well. And of course, being a modest person, thought, well, I'll go on. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, we really do need another voice within our local body politic. We need a voice from my side of the tracks, my side of Bank Street. I live on Connecticut Avenue near the intersection of Connecticut and Broad. And it's that kind of north side perspective or top side perspective, first district perspective, isn't largely represented within our city council, within our Board of Ed, really, and certainly not represented in a Mike Passero versus Marty Olson race, right? They both live quite close to Ocean Beach. And so I thought about the issues that confront me every day and confront my neighbors around, trash on our streets and, police being aggressive towards our members of our community and our schools really not serving the needs of our young people as well as they need to. I thought about the way our trash is picked up and the way our parks look and really wanted to bring kind of my side of the community and those voices to the fore. So I entered this political space with trepidation and humility, but also with kind of like a little fire in my belly about really wanting New London to work for my neighbors, for Dave and Nick and Nina and the people who live right around me, taxpayers, citizens, residents, parents who just don't feel engaged, don't feel listened to, don't feel heard, and wanting to carry those voices. And so it seemed like an opportunity, right? An opportunity to talk about, the green platform, kind of broadly speaking, peace and ecology and direct democracy and all these kind of big concepts, but also to really get down to the granulars of what people's daily concerns are. And so I felt really kind of motivated and sort of excited about building a campaign around a real sense of presence and listening. And so these 3 questions that I've been asking all over our community: what do you love about New London? What frustrates you? What's one concrete thing that would make your life better here? And I was knocking on doors along Connecticut Avenue, accosting strangers in the streets and turning them into friends on Saturday. And people, I talked to a guy who was standing on the street, and I thought, I wonder what he's doing, just standing on the sidewalk, just waiting. And
I'm guessing no one else has ever asked him this question.
I said, "Hi, how you doing? My name is Frida. I'm running for mayor. What's your name?" And his name began with a B, and he's, maybe a little older than me. And I said, "I see you're just standing here. What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm waiting for the bus," obviously. And I said, "Oh, okay." And we talked about like the buses and how expensive they are, and how long he waits, and how he doesn't have a place to sit when he waits for the bus, and how the bus doesn't, go often enough for his needs. And so I filed all of that away and connected that to talking to seniors at the Senior Affairs Commission and thinking about, well, this is a relatively young guy. It's okay for him to stand for 10, 15 minutes and wait for the bus. But what if he were the age of my mother? What if he were 80 years old and the bus was delayed and she was just standing there for 20 minutes waiting for the bus? What if it was cold? And the Senior Affairs Commission folks said, there are no benches, there are no kiosks, there's no shelters except for that one. Very few around, and like, why not? Why not? Would bus ridership increase if there was a place to sit? If there was publicly available information right there about where the bus goes and how much it costs and how long it takes? I would ride the bus if I knew where they went, for example. So it's that kind of, so I'm making public transit one of my issues, and of course that aligns with the Green Party and our desire to fully utilize public transit resources, to make them fully accessible, to make them a green alternative. But those buses really are only a green alternative if they're full.
Right. Well, I travel to, bigger cities sometimes, and we use public transportation solely if we go to Portland, Oregon, or Seattle, or Vancouver, or Philadelphia, or New York, or DC. And, I from my point of view, the frequency or lack of frequency here is really a problem. I guess if someone rides the bus all the time and has a particular schedule, they know what time to be standing out there. But many of us just want to go to a bus stop and know we won't have to stand for more than 10 minutes.
Right.
And we won't necessarily memorize the schedule. We just need to know that we won't be out there an outrageous amount of time. So I would love to see that. I live just far enough away from downtown that a bus might some days be a really nice way to get from my house to like our Green Party office, for example.
That would be perfect, wouldn't it?
It would.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sort of torn whether we should talk more about platform or respond to some of the stuff that's in the news. But I think maybe we should talk about what's in the news, and then we'll go back to issues after.
Sure,
because we've had some glitches, to say the least, in this campaign. I think it was probably sometime in early July that we first really, and it wasn't the first time we talked to you, but when you really were expressing interest in running for mayor, and those of us on the Greentown Committee were enthusiastic about the idea. We had our nominating convention in August at Riverside Park, and there was a rainbow in the sky, and it was just perfect. And then what's been in the news like today was a court case to try to keep your name on the ballot, which it isn't.
That's right. Yeah.
So, I don't know. I don't know if you want to talk about your impressions of this, or if we should just, show people what the ballot will look like, because we do have a sample.
Well, let me say this. I'm hoping that people watching your show have read or will read Greg Smith's article in today's paper, which I thought did a really good job of laying out our case and the plaintiffs, the defendants were the plaintiffs. They're the defendants. The state's response to our charges, and then the judge's ruling. And at the end of that article, Smith characterized me as upbeat, right, and ready to keep running, right in, right on, right.
Yeah.
And I do feel upbeat, but I also have just really been sitting today with this anger about this capricious use of power, and this office whose job is to receive paperwork. That's what they do in this office. They receive pieces of paper, and for whatever reason, they did not receive, or they could not again find the piece of paper that we sent exactly the way we were supposed to, exactly the way we needed to. And so, the lawyer came down and the staff person came down from Hartford, and the whole time I was sitting across from them, I thought, we are looking at thousands of dollars worth of state taxpayer resources right in front of us. We are watching our money be spent, right? And these people both make more money than you and I, significantly more, and they're coming down to fight against the little Green Party of New London, and to try and make us look sloppy and disorganized, and just kind of as though we're doing all of this on a whim, And Rana, we're talking about really serious issues. We're talking about how we build a New London that's resilient to climate change and rising sea level. We're talking about making sure that our public resources are accessible to the 28,000 of us here who live in New London. We're talking about affordable housing and safe roads and more trees. These are serious issues. We're talking about, livable wages and higher quality of life for even the poorest of our community. And we're not sloppy, and we're not disorganized, and we have nothing but the best intentions, and we did everything that was said in the statute. And really the best response that they could have had is just to let us go, because they weren't certifying our signatures. We weren't trying to prove anything to them. All of that.
I don't think they ever denied that we that we had the proper nominating convention, or that none of them thought at all that you were not a candidate that we endorsed, which is, for me, the irony is, because I've been involved with this kind of thing for a long time, and when the New London Greens first had to petition in 2001 and 2003, that endorsement letter was not required. And the reason it was required was to protect the parties from someone who had incompatible values, who just wanted to run on the green line. So it was a mechanism that the party could say, no, we're not letting you run on the green line because you really aren't running on something we support. So here's legislation that was meant to protect us, and in the end it was kind of used against us in a case that no one, not one person from the Secretary of State's office thought that you were trying to pull one over on us.
Right.
Everyone knew that you weren't trying to pull something over on us. And when the petition applications were submitted, I actually submitted them on behalf, as chair of the party. Which I thought it was kind of funny that they grilled you on that process because, I don't think any Republican or Democratic candidates ever get grilled on, like, the paperwork aspect of running. They go to the party town committee or the party officers, and I felt that on a certain level they just didn't understand that we've had a town committee here for like 11 years.
Right.
So locally, in some ways, we have equal status to the Democrats and Republicans. And I think our local, city staff understand that because they were pretty shocked. But I think that the Hartford people just, I don't know, they just didn't have a feel for what is the reality in New London.
Yeah. So here we are, right? It's October 1st. The election is in,
5 weeks away.
5 weeks away, November 5th, as you said, Tuesday. Oh, today's Tuesday.
Today's Tuesday, so it's
literally 5 weeks away. And so we have this added challenge, which is, putting my name on the ballot by hand. And other candidates in the Northeast have won as write-ins. In fact, a friend of mine, Joe Comerford, won as a state senator in Massachusetts in a write-in campaign. There's a mayor in Lynn, Massachusetts, also a woman, interestingly enough, who won as a write-in a couple years back. And so it's possible. It's possible for us to win. And I understand that you talked to the registrar today and have a mock-up ballot, and we'll get to look
maybe
at that.
We can show that on screen. It is kind of hot off the presses. I think these ballots will be able to be seen online. I was told maybe by Friday. Okay, so this is, and unfortunately, it's kind of hard to read it all, but that's what the ballot looks like. And if you look on the first column, Michael Passero's name for mayor, and then Marty Olson, and then Michael Passero again because he was cross-endorsed by the Working Families Party. Then there's one blank, and then there's another blank. And in that number 5, row E blank, unfortunately, in the sample ballot, they filled in all the bubbles, so it looks like they don't want people to use it as a real ballot. But to vote for you, they will. People will have to fill in the bubble on that 5th row and write Frida.
Right, Frida.
And hopefully spell it right, but not required.
It's spelled Frida, like Friday without the Y.
Right.
And so people on that Tuesday, early in the morning or right before 8 o'clock, will have to think, what am I longing for? Friday. And how do you spell Frida? Like Friday without the Y.
And I think if people actually wrote Friday, it would count.
People call me Friday all the time.
Because I talked to the registrars when, 2 weeks ago, before we had that court battle, when we were first told there was this problem. And because Frida doesn't look anything like either Mike or Marty, anything that starts with an F basically will be counted.
Right.
If there were a candidate named Fred, or
We might be in trouble.
we'd be in more trouble.
Yeah.
But as it is, we were told they'll, as long as the voter intent is apparent, it will be credited. And I guess for our voters, I think it's a little less of a stretch than when Mike Bassetto ran as a write-in. He relatively successfully 8 years ago. He didn't win, but he was in second place as a write-in and got over 1,100 votes as a write-in. Our Green Party supporters are accustomed to having to look and be very intentional about finding our names. So this is one step beyond that, but I think people who vote for the Green Party tend to be intentional already. So this extra step hopefully won't be too intimidating. And I imagine that we will have a second batch of lawn signs. You can see behind Frida, the first batch of lawn signs, which I think are the most beautiful lawn signs out there.
Yep.
Thanks to Jesse.
Yep.
But I think the second batch of lawn signs probably will have instructions for how to vote.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Yep. That sounds really good. Yeah. And I guess, continuing to talk sort of about the broader campaign, one of the things that I found really striking about the last mayoral election was how few people voted. And because we're off the national cycle, people really have to turn out just for New London, right? Like you just have to go to the polls for Board of Ed, City Council, and Mayor. And last time around, only 3,300 people voted for Bill Vogel or for Mike Passero. And that made it pretty easy, we thought, for us to get 34 signatures to get the ballot line. And it's really a personal goal and a party goal that we really increase the number of people who vote in this election, that this is a high stakes election, and this is, as you said at the beginning, an election that matters more. It matters on a daily basis, who our city council members are, who our Board of Ed members are, and who our mayor is. And so I'm hoping we double turnout, right? And it would still really only be a third of the registered voters in our town, but it would send a strong signal that people are invested, people aren't paying attention, and people feel like they have real choice, right? It's a real choice in all three of these races. So that's a party goal, and we're working really hard for that, really reaching out to unaffiliated voters and really signing up new voters.
There have been quite a few people registering to vote, which is exciting. And then when they actually come to the polls, it will be even more exciting.
Right.
Well, the fact that the mayoral election in 2011 had about 43 or 4,400 voters, a lot more than 4 years ago, I think really demonstrates that a range of different candidates who have different strengths and might represent different constituencies and have different visions does draw more voters to the polls. And that was honestly, from my perspective as a Green, one of the reasons why I really wanted to see a Green Party candidate for mayor this year. Having seen like 4,400 people voting in 2011 and then seeing it down by over 1,000 voters 4 years later, only because the race wasn't so interesting. Well, that's what it seems to me.
Right.
Like, let's make it more interesting. Let's make people feel like voting does really make a difference, and it isn't just, just white men in their 60s who are voting, who are running. And I have nothing against white guys in their 60s, but
you're married to one, right?
Yeah, for another couple months. He's turning 70, like, in a couple months. But yes, he is there. So I have nothing against that, but if you look at the diversity of our city, it's they're overrepresented in government, and even as smart. I mean, and I'm an older white woman who lives south of the hospital, and sometimes even people who are very empathetic, if you don't like have those other experiences, they're sort of off the radar screen.
Right.
So I'm really ready to see more younger candidates, more women, more people of color in our campaigns and in our government.
Yeah. One of the first things I thought about when, you and I and some other people in the party started talking about issues was this idea of really trying to make city government and spaces of decision making and deliberation more accessible and more attractive to people with young children. And so high on my list of platform planks, I guess, is offering childcare both at city council meetings and at Board of Ed meetings, recognizing that these meetings are so important. All sorts of big issues that affect our lives are decided in these spaces, and not enough of us show up often enough. And one of the big reasons I don't show up as a parent is 7 o'clock on a Monday night, and
the kids have school the next day.
The kids have school the next day, and I don't have money to hire a babysitter to go to we don't go on dates. We're definitely not hiring a babysitter to go to city council, So a couple of times when there's been a big call out about something really important, we've gone and, me or my husband is out in the hallway with the kids and try and attract a couple other kids out and, draw on the floor, not on the floor, but like draw, on paper on the floor or something, just something to occupy young people so that parents' voices can be heard in those spaces. And so, I do bring a parent's, a mother's perspective to this, and really, our like the incredible breakdown of trust in our school system last year, and the way in which the community kind of came out in the aftermath of that, highlighted first how much people care, but also how divided people's attentions are before a tragedy / scandal / crime like that comes to light, right? And I think the Board of Ed and all kind of education-related spaces really saw an uptick in, in involvement and turnout, and yet, I think that's way down now, right? And so, how do we sustain transparency? How do we sustain accountability? How do we sustain communication? And providing childcare is a big part of that, because people will come out once because they're angry or they're scared or they're concerned, but really our government works best when all of our eyes are on it, and it's hard to individually sustain that, right?
And as you were talking, I was thinking, I used to work for Head Start, and of course, everything we did, we always provided food and we provided childcare. And one interesting thing that's different in your resume than in maybe what people perceive as a typical resume for a mayor, people think, someone who's a lawyer or has an MBA or an MPA degree. And, of course, people who have those degrees are usually people from wealthier families because they could afford higher education, and it doesn't give all of the kinds of experience that are useful. I think it's sort of just a very narrow way to look at the job. So I'm thinking about two organizations that you have been involved in for years, Fresh New London and the Community Land Trust. And that isn't even, thinking about some of the organizing with War Resisters League that you did more in the past. But how do you feel as though your involvement and in some cases leadership roles in these like grassroots organizations has prepared you for potentially a job as mayor?
Yeah. I think in both within the Community Land Trust and Fresh New London, while I have various titles in both of those spaces, my main role is twofold. I'm a communicator and a consensus builder, and so three, and then a talent elicitor. And so, the Community Land Trust that you and I are both key people within really started as a set of conversations around the lack of affordable housing and started with a crisis, right?
And low home ownership rate, but yes, with the crisis of where are these families who live on Crystal Avenue going to move to?
Where are they going to move to when the Edgerton project, which was supposed to sort of absorb all of those people, was squelched, was killed, and then looking around our city and realizing there's plenty of places for people to live. They just need resources. And one of the critiques of the Edgerton project was that we were building affordable housing at $230,000 a unit, right? Or maybe even a little bit more, and that there are all these subsidies that were put together to do that. And then looking at pretty much any street in New London has at least one house that could use $230,000 worth of renovation, or less. Could be livable for $50,000.
And some are two-family houses, so you could really house two families there.
Right. So really, we saw this landscape, saw that New London has the lowest rate of home ownership in the entire state. We're at 35% are like you and I, homeowners. And there are lots of reasons for that, and that might be a whole show, and perhaps has been in the past already. But and then we started taking that around and talking to more people, showing films, bringing people out, always providing food, always providing childcare, always ensuring that people knew each other's names, that people kind of connected, whether that was a circle of 10 people or 40 people. And I am always interested in that. It's so weird that people would come to a meeting and not have an opportunity to sort of connect or sort of speak in any way. And then from that, we built an organization, and we own property, and we've renovated it, and we're selling it and looking for more, all kind of on the basis of permanent affordability, and for New London residents, and that we build our tax base, pretty slowly in that way, but sustainably, right? Sustainable increase of our tax base, right? One taxpayer at a time, and one good home of solid, unspeculative value, like real value, within our community. Our house is on Press Street, which is a house that really was pocked with unregulated sober houses for a long time. It seemed like a place where a lot of crime was happening, and now is stabilizing. I think in part because of Fresh New London's role in the community.
The McDonald Park project, I think, was huge.
And so that, so I can kind of segue from one project to the other. Working with Fresh New London, we really take our direction from the community. So the city of New London offered Fresh this plot of land and said, do something with it. And we, wanted to jump at that opportunity, and, didn't want to put the cart before the horse, right? Our own desire for a community garden to supersede the community's need for involvement and buy-in and enthusiasm. We couldn't do this without the community. So we knocked on every door surrounding McDonald Park and just talked to every single person. We knocked on 121 doors. We talked to 200 people. We talked to people in English and Spanish. I had a young student who spoke Creole, and that was also very helpful, and said, what do you want to see here? And the community, and we went through a whole charrette process and design process. We talked about a basketball court, and fire pit, and all sorts of other ideas, a playscape, and kind of settled on this idea that is totally beautiful, is flourishing, and is making multiple uses of this relatively small space. But it's turned a kind of a blank space that was mostly used by people using drugs and drinking in public and dumping, and turned it into this very dynamic and fruitful space. We're going to, my colleague Alicia met with Dave DeNoia today. There'll be a playscape there. Playscapes are incredibly expensive, which I did not know, and so
They are.
$20,000 just like that. But it was important to the community, and we were able to fundraise for that. So these sorts of experiences have made me see the importance of starting with communication, starting with listening, being accountable, being and not overpromising. Right? We didn't build a tiny house or a permanent farmer's market, or like some of the big idea, greenhouse, right? We have built incrementally over the last 2 years. We have plans to continue to develop there, and so I bring to my pursuit of the office of mayor a real commitment to consensus building, to listening to all sides, to civil discourse and civil disagreement, and to accountability. I think that those commitments, are and the skill of using a tool like consensus building, even within a democracy where at the end of the day majority does rule, just that value on making sure that everybody's heard is, I think, as valuable, if not more valuable, than an MBA or a law degree within the context of our city, especially when, the mayor doesn't rule by themselves, right? There's a city manager and a chief financial officer, and there's all these other, paid positions, unelected, paid positions within the city that, make sure that, nothing starts happening, without all the I's being dotted and all the T's crossed.
Well, and I wanted to point out that I think we heard some very tangible evidence recently that crime in that neighborhood has gone down.
Yeah.
So it has a result, and more, I think, everyone is concerned about public safety, of course, but more and more, I think we have to realize that our preventive dollars have more bang for their buck than our reactive dollars.
Right. Which is why in Frida Berrigan's administration of the City of New London, we are no longer going to pit the education budget against the budgets of the police department and the fire department. We're sort of all on the same team. We're all, serving the same city, and Public Works also is in that mix. And we're not going to compete for our scant resources. We're going to make sure that resources are apportioned, by need and by strategy, and by building our city back up. And that might, an assessment of our total budget might yield the conclusion that we don't need as many firefighters as we have, right? That our police department is over-resourced in some areas and under-resourced in other areas. For example, in the area of body cameras and computers within the police department. And so looking at how we can ensure that each dollar that we take, that the city takes from the taxpayer, comes back to the taxpayer in schools that are safe and streets that are safe and houses that are safe, and civil servants who have the best interests of the population in mind at all times.
Yeah, I think part of the frustration that some taxpayers feel is when they don't feel like they're getting a return on their taxpayer dollars. And, I feel much more frustration on that on a federal level than I do on a local level, because, on the city level, I do see, well, my street gets plowed when it snows, my trash gets picked up, there are parks I can go to. But I think that the more taxpayers feel as though they are really getting something for what they're putting into the city, the less disgruntled they're likely to feel, and the less resentful they'll feel about putting that money in.
Sure, and one of the things that you and I have talked about in the past is people who don't put a coat of paint on their house because they don't want their taxes to go up. People who don't make needed repairs to their homes or properties because they don't want their taxes to go up. They can't afford for their taxes to go up. So I'd like to incentivize stewardship. I'd like to incentivize investment, right? You put a coat of paint on your house and you hire a local house painter, and you're not penalized for that, right? And so how about an abatement for 5 years on improvements? And I think homeowners would look at that and be like, well, okay, yeah, I will fix my porch. I will repair my walk. I will put in a new driveway. And I will paint my house blue because blue's my favorite color, right? And I think a lot of homeowners are like, oh, I feel really hemmed in all the time, and that's a hard thing to feel. Another thing we've talked about is planning for more density, right? And so some of the big houses down on Pequot or on Montauk, could those be two-family homes? Could they accommodate a mother-in-law kind of apartment, or would an older person bring in a younger person as a, in a caretaker kind of capacity? And could our zoning be updated to accommodate intergenerational living that would benefit the homeowner, who, is living in a big house that they no longer need all that space, and really benefit a young person at the same time.
No, that's funny that's sort of an old pattern. I live on Evergreen Avenue, which is a pretty old street, and it's a one-family residential zone, but about half of the houses are 2 or 3 family homes that were grandfathered in. And when we moved in 25 years ago, nearly all the 2-family homes were multi-generations of one family. And there are still a few homes that are like that have family members in the 2 different units. So, for me, that makes so much sense that people can go through different stages of their lives, being, young singles or couples, and growing a family, and then being empty nesters, then being elderly, and not having to move out of your neighborhood. You might have to move upstairs or downstairs or down the street a little, but you don't have to move to the other end of town or out of town to find a place that meets your current needs.
Right. And I notice, going around our city, that particularly on a street like Pequot, it seems like every other house is for sale. And as a resident, I'm curious about that. And it seems slightly alarming to me. And as mayor, I would really drill down into each of those situations and really help those homeowners think about it. I would put the resources of the city, the staff of the city, into, how do we make this work? How, if you want to stay in this community, how do we make that happen? I kind of feel like the mayor's job should be more kind of as the welcome committee and the kind of put down the welcome mat kind of role, and less of a city manager, because we kind of have those tasks assigned. And I think as we move to the strong mayor, there's, I think, lots of good reasons for that, but the way things are now, it seems like there's some, I think I would just want to be handing out welcome mats to every new resident of New London, and making people feel as welcome as possible, and helping people feel like they can, the way I feel about this town, that, I can move here and I can raise my kids here and I can kind of become a New Londoner, right? Even though I wasn't born here, right? And I think that sense of belonging that I have, I want to make sure that everybody who lives in our community feels that same sense of belonging.
Well, thinking about the mayor's job, because we know the mayor hires experts for department heads, so the mayor provides the vision and the cohesiveness, but doesn't really need to deal with all the details. The city council recently approved a raise for the mayor.
Yeah.
And I think the original concept was that the mayor would be the vision person. It wouldn't be a career job. And the department heads, who were the experts in their field, actually would make more money than the mayor. Mm-hmm. So what are your views on the pay attached to this job?
Yeah. So right now the mayor makes about $83,000 a year, and the raise that you said, when I think of a raise, I think, oh, $2 an hour more, like yay. But the city council approved a $27,000 raise effective, after this coming election.
So that's like 30%.
Just 30% raise to $110,000. And the rationale behind it was, as you said, to bring him closer to what those professional department heads make, and as though we aren't all equal already, like the fact that I make $20 an hour doesn't make me half as much as somebody who makes 40 or 60 right. or 80, right? Like that he can't be on equal footing with other people within his administration because he doesn't make as much money is just sort of facile to me. Like that doesn't really hold any water. But when I heard that and thought about running for mayor and possibly occupying that place, I thought a couple things at once. One, 30% of New London residents live below the poverty line, and so 30% raise for the head of that city seems like it widens a disconnect instead of resolves it. And I would want to be about resolving that disconnect. And I see that disconnect as kind of like, from the beautiful homes of Pequot to the, kind of to the tenements of West Coit Street, right? And there being a real disconnect between those two streets, right? But when I thought about those resources, I also thought about some real tangible things that I see missing within our city, right? So we don't have a recycling coordinator, right? We don't have anybody whose job it is to help the residents of New London recycle, and our rates of recycling are super low as a result. people of New London need constant education in at least 4 languages to figure out what to do with all of our extra plastic and cardboard and metal. New London hasn't had a recycling coordinator since the early 2000s when Pat Bowles retired, right? So, so that seems like a particular gap that I'd like to see filled, and I would put many of the resources that have been set aside for the mayor's personal salary to closing that particular gap. And then, you know, I like to see us really call on the knowledge and the wisdom and the expertise of those of us who live here, right? And kind of set our sights, you know, both more organically and more modestly around who knows best how to solve the problems of New London.
Okay, now my bad news is we have about 2 minutes left.
Oh my gosh, we're just getting
We'll
started,
have to do
Rana.
this again. So I guess what I wanted to make sure people know is when the upcoming debates are.
Yeah.
And the first one is Thursday, October 10th.
That's right.
And it is sponsored by League of Women Voters and the Day newspaper. It will be at Jennings School. The doors open at 5. The debate starts at 6. So that will be the first chance to see all 3 mayoral candidates. And then the following Wednesday, October 16th, New London Landmarks will have its debate at the New London Library in the community room at 6:30 p.m. And there are more, I think, in our community calendar. We put some. Some dates are still juggling. I found out this afternoon. But those 2 that I read are still good.
Yep.
So people, I really recommend that people come to those debates because, you know, it's an interesting campaign. There are differences among all the candidates. And, you know, I hope people take advantage of it. And you have about 1 minute for like a closing remark.
30 seconds. So in closing, I'm just really excited about this next month, these next 5 weeks, talking to as many New Londoners as possible, and really hope that people will turn out for the mayoral debates, the Board of Ed debates, and the City Council debates, and involve themselves as much as possible in this important election season. So,
well, thank you, Frida.
Go green.
Maybe we'll do this again when it's a little closer to the election.
Cool.
We need a part 2, I think. And for everyone out viewing, next week I've invited some candidates from Willimantic. They have 9 Green Party members running for office there. I'm not sure who will show up, but I've been told a few will. And we'll get to talk about Wyndham issues and how the Green Party plays out there. So we'll see you next week, and we'll also see you at the first debate on the 10th. So
Great.
Thank you, Frida.
Thank you, Rana.